This is the Capital Market on Channels Television. Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Ididiong Iwang. Since October the 8th, youths in the commercial hub of the country, Lagos, have taken to the street to protest against police brutality and the excesses of a unit in the Nigeria Police Force known as Special Anti-Robbery Squad SARS. By October the 20th, it had spread to all major cities in the country. The protest, which had begun peacefully, had been hijacked and turned violent. In the evening of October the 20th, soldiers opened fire at unarmed protesters at Lekki Toll Gate, one of the protest points in Lagos, leaving several people injured and some dead. It's gone downhill from then on as hoodlums have taken to the streets, destroying property, setting places on fire and looting shops. And this has occurred beyond Lagos. Already, some state governments have begun to impose curfews to douse the tension and restore law and order. But what is the impact of these developments on an economy that's already headed towards a recession, and how will that affect the capital market? Benga Onifade, an investment analyst, joins us now to answer these questions and more. Good evening, Mr. Onifade. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening, Ididiong. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, let's just begin the show with your reactions following the developments here in Nigeria regarding the NSAS protest and the unrest that has followed. What do you make of it all?
I think it's actually been a very horrible sight to watch. And, this kind of reminds me of what's happened in South Africa, which seems to be the protest capital of Africa, really. We're talking about a service delivery problem, kind of a way whereby the government are actually telling people to hold on while they deliver a service, and the people, while they deliver a service, to the people. But it kind of seems like a cliche, but I think people got tired of waiting. Hence, they fueled the protest, and people were spilled out to the streets. So I just think it's one of those two things, a chicken and an egg, really. How long do you want to wait while this delivery or this service is delivered, and at the same time, how long have you got before you can wait, before you say, do you know what, I've been pushed to the wall, and it's not, it's time for me to bite back. So I don't think it's been a good signal at all from both sides, but no, it hasn't been impressive at all.
Well, speaking generally, before we bring it home, what impact does social unrest such as this have on economies and the markets?
Okay, there are two things when you're looking at the economy. The two things drive the markets. It's the fear and the greed. And generally, the market does not like uncertainty. And this, at this point right now, it's just been extremely negative on all sides of the market. So it's actually been very adverse, and which is actually creating what I call it inflationary and fiscal impacts. So I believe the markets would react, and of course it would react negatively overall.
So far, the government has lost a lot of money, which is hitting the economy. Now, we've seen state governments imposing curfews, banks are closing branches, and so on. What does all that mean for a country that's already headed for a recession?
It doesn't mean well. I'm sorry to say this. It doesn't mean well. I don't want to be the preacher of evil, of bad news, or deliverer of bad news. There's something actually the IMF said, which they said that, the Sub-Saharan African department of the IMF, and they said that, when you're looking at the economic growth, one of the things that actually feel the lack of or low economic growth is as a result of poverty. And I think that's probably one of the things, really, so doubling down on the people might be a really short-term strategy right now, but I'm not sure if that's the solution to it. So yes, the market is going to feel the long-term impact of this, but I'm not sure if that's the solution presently right now.
Well, social unrest creates fear and uncertainty, just like we've said, in the mind of investors who are concerned about safeguarding their assets. Now, with what's going on in Nigeria right now, what should we be expecting from investor sentiment in the short term?
Well, I think one of the things, as a Nigerian myself, that we haven't actually been doing very well is we haven't actually been looking at social risk analysis. And when we talk about social risk analysis, which is created as a result of a populist movement, in our case, the NSAS, we're looking at indecision, we're looking at multi-year cash flow overall. Analysis are getting muddled up. You as an investor right now, if you're thinking, because as an investor, you are factoring in momentum and velocity into any market you are looking to enter. So as a result of this social unrest, all these things was translated into financial markets, which has actually been beating down this instability. And there's a track of actionable business intelligence, which we do not have. So that's something I think we probably need to do better. We need to be learning from the past, really, time and time again. We need to start talking about, how do we deliver? And so we tend to factor in the traditional risk management, but when we're talking about the social risk management, which we can augment into all of these things together, having an analysis which could help us accurately predict, and we could profile, we're looking at so many things in question, the geography, we're looking at the tribes, we're looking at the even the asset mispricing. That's one of the things that social. So I think if I'm going to bring anything to this point at all, I think social risk management, we need to augment it with the traditional risk management. It's not just a panacea, but it helps reduce uncertainty.
With the degeneration of the ongoing protests into social unrest, should we expect a knee-jerk reaction from investors?
I wouldn't expect a knee-jerk reaction at all. Well, I think normally I would expect people to do that. That's just a normal characteristics of a people. But when you're looking at how do investors tend to react? We've been there before. We've been through wars, and I'm not by any chance saying this is actually ideal. We've just always been there. People tend to have a knee-jerk reaction, and then they tend to recover all over again. But before you do that, you've got to take a few things into consideration. And we're looking at behavioral economics right now. Are you looking at are you looking at flight or fear? Are you going to run? But I think people need to take caution and review their position before they actually run or make a decision.
What about foreign portfolio investments now? Are they likely to remain on the sidelines, or should we be expecting a flight of FPIs?
Well, when it comes to foreign portfolios, that I think even down itself as well, that will be on the edge, really, because if you're thinking that is you're looking at the liquidity of this asset and how safe are they. So are you expecting a quick sell-off when it comes to foreign portfolio investors? I do expect that too, because like I said, talking about the uncertainty which you bring into this market, and market do not like uncertainty. So you're thinking about existing investment, they'll be tinkering on what are they going to do, because if there's pressure on local investors right now, then of course when you're looking at the foreign portfolio, there will be extra pressure on them too, and this pressure puts on another great deal of fear on foreign exchanges too. On what's our main export right now is oil, but it's actually readily available elsewhere, because I would rather do a trade elsewhere compared to an organization or an environment which is very unstable. So I think yes, you do expect some instability and a lot of pressure on foreign portfolio. Yes.
Well, speaking about, we've talked about foreign portfolio investment, but what damage does that do to foreign direct investments?
I think I don't think we realize the cost of it right now. We cannot put a cost on it. But if you think about it, we just coming from an existing pandemic, which we haven't even been able to wash our hand of. And I don't want to get into the politics of how it's been managed, whether it's been a great deal of management or not, but we haven't even been able to wash our hands on that. So now we want to talk about, an investor from outside looking in. So generally, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think it's in any state a great deal. The dollar has been already stressed out right now, so it's going to keep pushing it up. There's a bit of noise there. It's going to keep pushing up the dollar. It's going to keep stretching it overall. So yes, number one, there's a risk of flight. There's an element of behavior which people tend to think, okay, do I run away or do I look elsewhere? But there's so many other strategies people tend to put into consideration. And if it's so, if you think about if you want to look at if you want to facilitate or evaluate the real cost of an investment right now, I think every signal here is just saying run away and don't look at Nigeria. So this is not a good look.
Speaking about foreign exchange, which you've done already, how will that impact the Naira? Are we likely to see the Naira fall against the dollar, or what's going to happen?
I think naturally, if you think about the way the market runs, the market actually leads while the economy does react, or the economy lags behind it. And I haven't actually looked at I looked at the Nigerian markets on Friday, and a few of them did react. I think it's a bit slower than what we get outside. But I do expect absolutely the naira will take a tank. It will take a dip. It will take a battering. It's already taken a battering already. And so compounded with what's going on right now, you do expect the naira to just hit the roof, and it's just making it look extremely unattractive. Totally, yes.
Well, it's been a tough year already due to COVID-19 pandemic. With the lootings we're seeing now, what message does that pass to foreign investors?
Well, when you think about foreign investors, they are, of course, that's just they're just going to read Nigeria negative. And when you think about as a foreign investor, you want to factor in a long-term strategy into your investments. You want to invest in an uncertain climate or geographical location. So, you think about the world is actually it's getting smaller. It's very interconnected overall. But there are some, it will be telling despite the presidential address, which we saw on Friday, I think, or it was Friday, yeah. So it was not neither here nor there. There wasn't much in terms of what to give away. I think for me, for example, it didn't actually preempt anything in terms of, oh, do you know what? Now we've got peace, calm down. Because overall, we do have quite a lot of apologies. And they're still thinking, do you know what? We're still not impressed. So again, I think foreign investors haven't heard anything. It doesn't put their mind at rest, number one. Number two, it didn't tell them in terms of what analysis or where direction, where the country is going. That's another point. Another point, sir, is it's actually telling, naturally, you expect me personally, if I'm a foreign investor, I want to move my money to a safer security, and haven't been able to see that yet. And considering this is something that recurs all over again, it's all well and good to be able to quench a protest, but I want it to be quenched in an ethical way, because we're looking at environmental safety, environmental social governance, in this day and age, investments right now. So the fact that we haven't actually been able to get a suitable response of both from the government and from the people on board, this actually overall just doesn't put the capital at work. The proposed capital to be invested, it doesn't put it at rest or put it in a peace of mind. It doesn't give it peace of mind.
I'd just like to quickly ask you this. What programs can the government come up with that will be inclusive of the young people and the poor people?
Okay. So externally, you've got to think, when you think Nigeria, you've got to think, it's one trouble today for the one day, one trouble for the economy in a way, really. So there's so many other things, now we've got to think or factor in. I've actually mentioned a few, social risks, which we have to augment with our traditional risk management. I think we need to start looking into people-focused, partnership-driven economy. You've got to get people involved in what you are doing, because ultimately, these are the movers when it comes to you making this decision. Of course, there has to be some, really, when you're looking at your fiscal and monetary policies, everything has to be integrated and people-driven again. So, even sometimes, this is what's happened before. If you think about June 12, we've been in 1993, we've been there before as a country. I think the country's always going to get beyond this, ultimately. However, me talking about people-driven economy, there's got to be relatively friendly policies. Sometimes, you do get the wealthy who don't really mind being taxed a little bit extra, because at the end of the day, fiscal policies and monetary policies, they tend to contract and relax, whichever way you do, and they lead each other. So we're not trying to get theoretical right now. We want to double down, and we want to be extremely fair to the people, get the people involved in the policy making. And of course, it's kind of like a bottom-up approach, not just a top-down approach. Top-down approach has probably not been working, but how about we change and we look into other situations in order to make these things work?
Mr. Onifade, speaking about recovery options now, what do we have? Where do we go from here? And how long do you think this recovery will take?
How long is a piece of string? You could say that. So, one of the things I do think we need to do is, like I said, we need to learn from the past. We've been here. We're gonna get beyond this. And if you think about, let's even talk about the Great Depression. What happened at that point? I think at some point they were rationing. People were rationing meals and rationing things. However, as a country, we could always learn from other countries. We used to be a giant, and we could always move beyond this. But in order to do that, how about we have a combined, total investment? When we're looking at that, we get the government point, improving the government purchases as well. And this is one of the ways which America grew in the 1930s. And, the same thing that happened 100 years ago still applies today. The net exports grew as a result of that to the point of capacity. And if we think what brought us here right now, it's literally, of course, we had a global pandemic in addition to the protest. And so we need to be able to get beyond this and get to full utilization. Hence, we can get to utilization of the capacity, full capacity, enabling the youth, having them involved, included in policies. So. And then full utilization to capacity that way, because, that way we will have a reduction. Because I know right now there's been a lot of people who've been considering abroad, because just the fact that there's been a very low confidence in the markets, low confidence in the government, coupled with the society, everything. So that's the only way we can move beyond this. So like I said again, combine total investment with the government, improve the net purchases, and of course, net exports will grow as a result of that.
All right, Ms. Onifade, thank you for your input on the program. Benga Onifade is an investment analyst.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, investment and research firm Codrus Asset Management has called on the federal and state government to take immediate and the right action decisions that will reduce the impact of the EndSARS protest on foreign investors' confidence in Nigeria. In an interview with Channels Television, the acting managing director of the company, Bolahon Aino, says part of the measures, which include bridging the inequality gap between the rich and the poor, will also go a long way in addressing some of the economic challenges facing the country. Let's take a listen.
People have lost their jobs. I saw a lot of malls that have been destroyed. If you recall, several months ago when we had the xenophobic attack as well, there were a lot of malls that were destroyed, they were looting, but this seems to be grander than what we saw in the prior months. In the prior months, we didn't see destruction, we didn't see places being razed. Now we've seen a lot of buildings, a lot of malls, a lot of institutions being razed, and that's to quantify it to several billions, hundreds of billions have been lost in terms of the Naira equivalent. In terms of impact on GDP, we expect to see a negative GDP. Our outlook has been that we're going to see a GDP of about 4% negative. With what has happened, we expect the impact to be more severe, and we are forecasting about 6% in terms of impact on GDP. Of course, that's quite obvious. Business activities have been grounded. A lot of companies, like I said, have been affected as well. We're on lockdown, people can't go about their activities to earn their living as well. And the FX issue is still there as well that Nigeria is still battling with. So on a GDP perspective, we expect that to come down. In terms of the sectors that we think that is going to be badly hit, we think transportation sector is going to be affected. At the moment, people can't go about, goods and services cannot be transported. So we expect that to have a major impact in terms of transport GDP. We also expect trade to be affected. If you recall, because of the decline in consumer wallets, in terms of what people could get in terms of consumption, household consumption have been affected. And now we expect higher inflation, higher food prices. That's further going to affect wholesale and retail trade. And of course, in conjunction with the existing supply chain disruption that we've seen in the past couple of months. And that sector that I think is going to be badly affected is the manufacturing sector. They've been plagued with lack of FX for several months, and this is also going to affect them in terms of business. At the moment, the business confidence level in Nigeria is negative 17%. So all this does not augur well in terms of the investment climate, and like I said, the impact is going to be quite severe. To just mention, Nigeria, of course, is expected to enter a recession, which is 2 quarters of negative GDP. But apart from that, I think the major thing is that there's an economic phenomenon that is called stagflation. And really, that's what's going to happen to Nigeria. Stagflation talks about high unemployment, it talks about recession, and it talks about high inflation rate. Nigeria at the moment have inflation rate about 13.7%. That is massive. That is the 13th consecutive high inflation that we've seen. And this is the highest we've seen since February 2018. We expect that to go higher as the lockdown and the curfew is extended. Like I said, we're entering recession, and of course, we are going to have high unemployment. Unemployment rate is currently at 27%. And the reason stagflation is really such a difficult phenomenon is because a lot of policy watchers, a lot of economic people that formulate policies, they find it difficult because usually if you want to tackle recession, you have an expansionary policy. You try to bring down interest rates so that things in the economy can boom. You want to tackle inflation, for instance, you try to heighten rates. So there's a conflicting scenario, and that means they need to choose between either tackling inflation or tackling recession. So that's where we find ourselves in terms of impact on GDP. In the past couple of months, there's been the FX challenge. A lot of the FPIs that had position in the equity market have not been able to exit because they've been sort of, they've not been able to get the FX demand as they ought to. And coupled with this as well, it's just going to heighten a lot of fears. Investors don't want to have any fear factor. They want to invest in stable economy that's when they can have their returns. So this is going to impact the FDIs coming into the country or the economy. Also FPIs coming as well. We saw a lot of police stations being burned down. We saw the NPA building being burned down. We saw a lot of the malls, and some of those malls are not local. They are foreign owned. So for a lot of investors, they don't want to come to economies that seem unstable because really it's people's funds, and return is usually key when you invest. So this is going to really heighten or just make the investment climate not too attractive. So in the immediate, I would expect the state government and the federal government to try to douse that low confidence, to try to restore confidence, one in the citizen and in the investing climate. I think another thing that came out of this is the social unrest. I think the income inequality gap in Nigeria is really can't be ignored in this period. And found a lot of looting that went on in a lot of the shops in Lekki, in Surulere, people just going about taking TVs, and that speaks to the income inequality gap, which is quite high in Nigeria. So I think that also needs to be attended to, try to reduce that inequality gap, reduce the divide between the rich and the poor. And there was a quote by somebody that said that one day that the poor will not have anything left to eat than the rich. And I think if that divide can be reduced, through education, through social infrastructure, and through healthcare, that can be addressed visibly, and that will be able to help the investors' confidence. And the much needed FPI and FDIs that we need will come back into the economy.
Well, that's a wrap on the show tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Edidiong Iwang. Do stay safe.